You're live.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We're going to wait for a few folks to join us. We're so excited that you are here for the November Mob United National Call. We're so excited to have you here. This beautiful picture that you see is a picture of Wanda Cooper Jones, mother of Ahmaud Arbery, while she was casting her vote in Georgia this past election. We're going to wait for a few more folks to join us. Our agenda for today, just sharing an inspirational quote that I thought was very relevant to the discussion that we are having today from Miriam Wright Edelman. And I would read it to you, but my screen is, the panelists are covering half of my, half of the screen, so.
I'll read it, Vanessa.
Thank you very much.
It says, education is for improving the lives of others and for leaving your community and world better than you found it.
Amen. And that's what it's all about, is really our future and how we are working to help our Black sons navigate the educational system so that they can come in and lead a world to a better tomorrow. So our mission, and oh, I'm so sorry, technical difficulties, excuse me. I am going to change the view. So sorry about that. Okay, so our mission and purpose is, Moms of Black Boys United provides information and support for moms of Black sons while we're promoting positive images of Black boys and Black men. And some of the ways that we do that is by creating image campaigns that show our sons in a positive light. The other half of our organization, Mob United for Social Change, focuses on influencing policy that impacts the way that our Black boys and men are treated by law enforcement and society. And that touches everything from, creating calls to actions that focus on events that affect our sons to fighting for legislature. To do this, we have created a 5-point approach that focuses on influencing policy, changing perceptions, demonstrating our power, which most of us did just recently in the recent elections, thank you, partnering strategically with wonderful people like who we have on the call here today, and promoting self-care, which is very important because we understand that if we are not taking care of ourselves, it's very difficult for us to take care of others. And so we just wanted to highlight some of the activity that happened around this year's elections. It was so great to see all our moms just pouring in images of themselves, of their sons, of them and their sons. A lot of moms took their sons to the polls with them to share what the voting process was like. A lot of moms took their sons to go vote for the first time. And so we're sharing here a couple of posts from those moms who wanted to let our community know how important voting was to them and to their sons and to our future. And then I'd love to share with you an upcoming call to action that we will have. I'm going to share, actually call on one of our Mob United moms, Frankie Robinson, who is on the line to share with us this recent call to action.
Hi, Vanessa. Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you. My name is Frankie Robertson, and I am here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I, too, am a volunteer mom with the organization. I volunteer and lead the policy efforts here in the state of Louisiana. And I am beyond saddened today to highlight a local murder of a son in Louisiana. Some of you may have seen some of the social media posts by various organizers and activists locally and some nationally as well regarding the death of Kawan Charles, a 15-year-old young boy in Louisiana. And right now we are gearing up to release a call to action. And we really want to make sure that all hands are on deck to get justice as it can be at this point in time for this beautiful young boy and his mother and his father and our community overall in general. On the evening of October 30th, 15-year-old Kawan Charles was picked up from his father's house by a white male and his mother. His body was found November 2nd. The parish of St. Mary refuses to release the findings of the autopsy. Kawan was reported missing to the Baldwin Police Department on Friday, October 30th. Kawan's mother, Miss Roxanne Nelson, said neither she nor her father gave permission for the duo to take her son anywhere. The family says police didn't seem concerned about the missing teen, saying he was probably at a football game. Although the family urged the police to issue an Amber Alert, which would have been issued probably in any other case, they did not. And days later, Kawan was found dead in a rural field in Iberia Parish. The foul play that followed is confusing and seems very similar to the makings of a hate crime and a lynching. And the family begged the police to help them search for their son. If they would have taken action, we really believe that Kawan might still be alive today. So Mob United for Social Change, along with Stand Black, a local organizing group in Southwest Louisiana, we're joining them and local, state, and national organizers in demanding a proper investigation on the Kawan Charles case and for the perpetrators to be prosecuted. They are demanding an independent investigation by the Louisiana State Police and the Justice Department into the mishandling of the Kawan Charles case. What we want is an outside jurisdiction to investigate this. So our organization will be releasing a call to action on our social media pages and through our normal sharing of information, our e-blast to our membership. So we're just asking that everyone be on the lookout for that. And please, just as soon as possible, take action to demand justice for this precious baby boy and his family and for all of us as moms, because we can't allow things like this to happen. It's just an absolute tragedy. So thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Frankie. When I received the news, when I saw the first social media post about this, I was completely baffled, but and now just hurt because I can't understand, why the world we live in is so cruel. But I'm hoping that that we can fight for and demand and get some answers as to what happened to Kwan, and then make sure that the people that are responsible for his death are held accountable to the fullest extent. So thank you. Sorry. Okay. And now on to our panel discussion. I'm sorry. I just realized that as we're getting here ready to have this great panel discussion about the impact of local elections, the impact of the school board, that's being moderated by a young man, very much like the young men that we encounter in these situations. It just, it really gets to me. But I'd love to take this on a positive note to really focus on why our school board members are so important. And we've got here some really wonderful people to speak with our moderators. So first, I'm going to introduce Karen McCree. Karen received her degree in special education from Alvernia University in Reading, Pennsylvania, and is currently completing courses towards a doctorate in special education at North Central University. Her professional interests focuses on educational equity, justice for special education, students through advocacy and training. Karen currently provides consulting services through Fresh Educational Services. Her professional experiences include teaching for special education, serving as the director of special education, and a middle school principal. Karen McCree was the first African-American female to elected to the Reading School Board and served 14 years on the board. In her capacity on the board, she was past board president, vice president, chairman of curriculum student, and other communities. Ms. McCree has served on the Berks County Intermediate Unit Board in Reading Human Relations Council and the NAACP as an education chairman. Ms. McCree volunteered for the NAACP 2020 elections and the Berks County Democratic Committee phone banks. Karen McCree is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I said it all out. Y'all happy? Tramelle Howard is an educator, a community advocate, and a deep believer in the urgent need to advance equity in all of its forms across every context. Tramelle was raised by a single mother who, despite never attending college, embodied and demonstrated the transformative power of hard work and commitment, working multiple jobs to ensure that the family had what it needed. Similarly, his maternal grandfather, who attended school only to the ninth grade, instilled in Tramelle and his siblings an unyielding belief that education can save lives. Tramelle credits that commitment to education for saving his life, helping to lift him and his siblings from poverty and build successful careers. A Baton Rouge native in 2018, Tramelle became the youngest person ever elected to the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board. Shortly after taking office, he was installed by his fellow members as vice president of the board. As vice president of the board, he has been a champion for disadvantaged students and led the creation and adoption of the EBR's first charter school accountability policy, ensuring that schools are first and foremost serving the best interests of students that students receive a quality education. He has also been a champion for diversifying the teaching force and making resource equity a priority. Tramelle began his professional journey in education as an 8th grade history teacher, serving with Teach for America South Louisiana after graduating with a Juris Doctor degree from Southern University Law Center. It was while working at the Law Center Student Family Law Clinic that his belief in the primacy of education in shaping life trajectories was reaffirmed. There, his clients were largely children of color facing financial hardship and trauma and bearing the weight of failures of an inequitable public education system. Tramelle is currently the Louisiana External Relations and Policy Manager for Education Trust, a national nonprofit that works close opportunity gaps that disproportionately affect students of color and students from low-income families. In that role, Tramelle is responsible for managing coalition work, policy implementation, and building community partnerships across the state. And next, Geno McLaughlin is the Community Engagement Specialist for Build Baton Rouge, formerly East Baton Rouge Redevelopment Authority, where he leads outreach, marketing, and communication efforts and utilizes his extensive background in organizing to build coalitions to uplift communities suffering from neglect and disinvestment. In addition, he is also principal at Abstract Concepts, a community development project management and consulting firm. Geno is the founder of Black Restaurant Week in Baton Rouge. He is the chairman of Penning Act's Louisiana Cats Community Advisory Board. He is a member of the Baton Rouge Multicultural Advisory Council for the Department of Justice. And he also sits on the board of Humanities AMPT, ExxonMobil Community Development Group, and was recently recognized as a 2019 40 Under 40 honoree. In 2016, Geno was tapped to serve as co-chair to the Arts and Culture for the City of Baton Rouge and Mayor President Sharon Weston Broome. Additionally, he serves as a mentor and a resource for several different youth groups throughout the city. It is his willingness to step out in recent times that have seen him recognized as an effective advocate and influencer for change in the region. He has managed to balance efforts to mobilize and organize concerned citizens while working to change policy, build influence and political realm. At the heart of it all, he remains the same, a man who hopes his work and his passion for people will leave an inedible mark on communities in which he serves. I apologize. I have not had my coffee this morning, but I'm going to get to it. Last but not least, Jazz Miles, our moderator, sophomore class president, policy pathways intern, tennis team member, founder of the Youth Coalition in Richmond Public Schools, member of the Superintendent's Super Advisory Council and Honor Council, former Virginia Senate page, and former Richmond Public Schools intern. He's also a former YMCA volunteer basketball coach, is our esteemed moderator for today. Thank you all for joining us. And Jazz, I am turning this over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you all are doing well. I just want to dive straight into it with my first question. From what I've personally seen with this election, especially with the school board election, I think there's a huge disconnect, and often as the election progresses, I feel as if those who are running start to lose sight of what they're actually running for, and it starts to turn into more of just politics and just being petty toward each other. And so they more so begin to focus on bashing and attacking each other rather than saying what they're actually going to do to fix the issue. I feel as if they're trying to show that they're just better than the other rather than why you should actually choose them. So my question is, do you all believe that serving the community, and especially the children, has become too political?
I'll
Yes,
go.
I'll crank off, I guess. As I guess the non-politician on the call, absolutely, absolutely. I think we need to divorce ourselves of politics in education, right? Many times it doesn't serve the interests of the children. We know that there is a price tag that is placed on the head of these children, and many times, again, those interests go on to serve corporations, politicians even, and not the individuals in which these policies or these boards are actually meant to serve. That's not to say we don't have some good politicians. Of course we do. And obviously we have some that are on the call with us. But I think it takes people who are outside the realm to continue to push those individuals and to hold them accountable, right? The school boards are there for a reason. It is accountability factor, right? But I think it's the role of citizens to actually hold the school board, elected officials, politicians, or what have you, accountable, and try to remove the politics from education, whether that's charter schools, whether that's even just the inequitable distribution of resources throughout the school districts. In Baton Rouge, we've seen white flight. We have a whole separate city that's trying to be formed that is done under the guise of education, right? Because they claim that that they want a better education, which I think we all do, right? But what they've decided to do is to actually remove themselves from the city so that they can create their own better system that will actually serve their interests, which is predominantly white. And so politics, all the different isms, racism, or what have you, are all unfortunately have embedded themselves in education. I think we need to actually remove all of that. But I think it takes actually, like I said, people who are on the outside of the system to actually really push the system further. And even if that means, becoming involved, I think that's what Tramelle did here in Baton Rouge, as a young man, seeing some of the problems, stepping into the fray and actually trying to work from the inside. But it still takes the people from the outside to push those individuals to really do the things that we really want to see done.
I'll weigh in. I think school boards are very political across the nation. After serving 14 years on a school board and watching and going to national conventions, you see it all across the nation. Unfortunately, different people run for different reasons. And because of that, it brings about those various reasons. Most school board members run and then aspire to move on to different political agendas. They don't want to stop as school board members. They move on to other positions in city council later on and move forward. So they start small and then they move up. And so of course then, Jazz, their thought processes are changing and evolving in that process. I believe school boards to best serve students need to be nonpartisan. We all run as either Democrats, independents, or as Republicans. Independents usually don't make it very far because you don't have a base. So if you really want to take the politics out of school board elections, run them as nonpartisan. So that means that any person, as long as they meet those basic qualifications, because in most states, in order to run for a school board, you just have to be 18 years of age and live in the city that you are residing in for at least a year. That's the only qualification, at least in the state of Pennsylvania, that qualifies you to run for a school board. There's nothing else. There's no educational limitation. There is no job. There is nothing else. You live in the city for a year and you have to be 18. Now, when you think about that qualification for someone who is going to make decisions about the educational lives of children, it's not much. You don't have to read and write. That's not much at all. You don't even have to have a voting. You don't have to have been a voter to run. So these are people who are actually making decisions for you as a young Black man who have no interest in you at all. And the majority of those people, in most instances, at least here, are white. And so that can be problematic as well. So if we make these elections nonpartisan, it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. So that way people are not necessarily using them as stepping stones, but that they're there to hopefully look or to better the educational system. I think we should look at what qualifies you to be on a school board. You know, in this country, we have boards that govern medical doctors. They have to have, you don't have non-doctors governing medical boards. Why in education do we have non-educators or people who have no experience governing school boards? Something is wrong. And so we need to look at that from a national standpoint. What do we need to qualify?
And I'll just thank you, Geno and Karen, for your responses. I'll just add, like, absolutely that school boards have become extremely political. One of the reasons I ran for school board was because I saw that, like, every issue at a school board meeting was never about students. It was always about, like, what adults were happening and what infights were happening amongst adults. But I think when you just look at the foundation of education, like, it has always been political, from segregation to all of these different laws that were created based on a political goal or narrative that people wanted the country to see. So as someone trying to change the institution from within, it's extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult trying to navigate the politics that exist within the work. And truly get to, like, students as their main priority, which is why I would hope that people run for school board is because they care about the well-being of students through education. But we see far too often that that's not the case. And as Karen and Geno had said, it's just like this political fight of trying to see who has the most political power. When I just think about the seats in East Baton Rouge Parish, which is the district I serve in, our seats on our board are gerrymandered through this political situation. Like, we have a majority Black district where 5 white Republicans have the majority seats within the school board. So it's just like all of these games within, and at the end of the day, the students who are affected the most are students who look like us, the Black students that we come here to talk about, our Black sons. I believe, like Ms. Karen, we need to really think about, like, the qualifications of running for school board. And just really doing a litmus test for people to see what is your interest? I mean, we govern and manage a $610 million budget per year. Like, that's a lot to think about, and that's a lot of responsibility. And so just to be able to sign your name on a sheet of paper and qualify to run, like, I think that we as a collective have to think about what that process looks like. So absolutely, school boards are too political, and we miss out on making students our main priority.
All right, thank you. Some great responses. My next question is with the coronavirus, as we've seen, it is affecting people all over the world. And what I've seen it is definitely affecting our schools and the children's education. We see a lot of children simply not showing up for online classes. We have the president threatening to defund schools that don't reopen. And what I've seen is it is disproportionately affecting lower income communities, especially with Black and brown communities. So my question is, do you all believe that this virus and online schooling has been harder for those who don't have as many resources to navigate through this and be able to work more so than other kids who, who have these things like Wi-Fi at their houses and laptops, and it's more easily accessible than someone who may not even have something as simple as a table to work on?
I'll start. There was one piece in my bio that we didn't discuss, is that I'm currently teaching. I did go back into the classroom, so I'm teaching virtually. So I'm teaching high school kids. So let me just tell you, they're struggling. They're struggling really hard. They don't show up. So you're exactly right, Jazz. They don't show up. And these are Black and brown kids. And it's terrible. I can tell you though, we're not ready to go back into classrooms either. So let me start back a minute or so. In Philadelphia, our numbers are going up in terms of COVID. I don't know about Louisiana, but I fought the adults for the kids not being able to be in school. Why can't we wear masks? Why can't we just be responsible and socially distance? We're the cause of our kids not being able to be in school. I'd love to be in the classroom with the kids. They need it. Our Black and brown kids need to be in a building. They are failing. So anybody listening, you understand our kids are suffering. First off, our schools did not have the infrastructure when the COVID started back in March. They didn't have it set up where all kids had access to internet service in their homes. They did not have access, the kids did not all have computers so that they could access Google Classroom and Zoom. And so what I'm finding is that we're having to teach kids. I'm going to show you something. You see this? Kids had cell phones, but they did not know how to access Zoom and the computer in their homes. They don't know how to go on a laptop and use it. And we're all right now in an age where we're using laptops and using Zoom and this platform of technology, but we forgot to teach. They didn't know that. And that's where they're struggling every day. And they're behind, different from their suburban counterparts. And yes, Jazz, it is hurting them. As a teacher in a classroom, I'm making all kinds of accommodations because, of course, I'm a special ed guru. This is what I love to do. And I'm making accommodations for my kids every single day to make sure that they have access and that they're still able to achieve and move forward without this pandemic affecting them to such a degree that they're going to fail. And I am most concerned about my sons, those Black boys that are in my classes, because they are at greater risk. And it is crippling every day because they don't want to sit. So my kids ask me, because I'm a very animated person. So they wonder, I go in every day and I'm like basically standing on my head. I have to make it fun for them. I have to do things every day using Bitmojis, using all kinds of things just to help them engage and want to be there with me every morning, just to be in that room. Because if you don't, and I have to be honest, I have to help them understand that I care. I don't care about all those other teachers. I care about you being here. And I care because I call them at home at night. I do whatever I have to do to make sure that they're there. I send them texts, send them emails, do whatever you got to do. Because they need to know that there's somebody other than their mothers that care. Then there's that whole piece that these urban parents don't care about their kids. These moms are working. These are sometimes single parents and they're working really hard. They're not at home watching their kids as some of the other parents. They don't have the luxury of working from home. They actually have to go out of their homes. So there's no parent at home watching over the kids to make sure they're on. That's the other piece. We have provided an internet service. We're teaching kids, and now that we're expecting them to have someone else there, there's no one home. So we have to do a better job. But I don't think right now it's not working. I would much rather have the kids in the school. And I'm hoping that Tramelle, you agree in your parish what's going on, but I'll give y'all a chance.
Yeah, so I'll just jump right in. Thanks for the question, Jazz. And I do agree that the digital environment, the digital learning surface is just really, it's not doing well. I think if you even go back before we even had this pandemic, there was already a large achievement gap between our Black students and their white counterparts. And so when you think about going into now different variables of like now the home life. So why I say all of that to say is that like we should have been building an infrastructure that supports literally the whole child. Like we should have been able to transition in a pandemic in 2020 with no problems. Like we should have been able to go to a virtual platform. But the first 6 months, everybody was just trying to figure it out, trying to figure something out. So I talk to my district about this all the time. Like as a country, as a society, we're so reactive when there are so many opportunities for us to be proactive, to build systems, to build infrastructures. There's no reason why a coronavirus should be causing the damage in our society in 2020 that it's doing. So because we have not been proactive, we're reacting to everything. So I think that there's a great divide, but I think it's also a double-edged sword. And I think about my time in the classroom teaching middle school students, like some of my kids' safest environments was inside of my school building. So if I was the teacher, I would think about even in the midst of a pandemic, some of my kids are having the most safest environment inside of my classroom. So I think that we have to give each other grace to figure this out because we're battling so much. I mean, we can see like the youth death rates and all of those things. I would like to see the study of those through this pandemic. Like you see people dying younger and younger and younger. And part of that is because we have eliminated an entire safe space for a lot of people. And so I think that we as a collective have to figure it out. But what we're doing right now is failing our kids, and specifically kids that look like us. Between the digital divide, between home environments, between like having resources, like being in a virtual environment is a privilege. Like I don't think people have identified it as such, but it is literally a privilege to be able to be in a safe environment, to sit in front of a computer for hours upon a day and be productive. And so we have to do better to service our kids, or else we're going to continue to spread that achievement gap throughout our society.
I guess I'll just, obviously everything that they said is spot on. As a parent of both a Black son, but also two young daughters who are being educated virtually right now, I was interviewed by our local newspaper in advance of this, and they were just asking my attitude on, whether or not we should go back virtual or what have you, and what I understood is that I actually hold a certain privilege, right? Because of my background, because of what I do, and because of my resources, right? And for me, obviously, it was first and foremost about safety and the health and happiness of my entire family and those that they actually interact with. And so I knew instantly that I was going to keep mine virtual, and they continue to be virtual right now, even though others have gone back in school in person here in Baton Rouge. But I understood that privilege that I had because I had, my mom, a support system, who that when I'm out, working, that those kids could actually be there. As Ms. McCree, touched on, a lot of parents, they are the essential workers, right? So they're not at home, and just thinking about, in a global pandemic, who is being affected the most? It is both the kids, but it's also those workers, those parents who have to go out into the work field. And, they're the parents who are at Walmart, they're the parents who are actually in the hospitals, right? And then they have to come home with what they've been exposed to. And, the kids haven't had necessarily the supervision to be in school, but then they also now exposed to whatever the parents have been exposed to, right? There is a a societal breakdown, really, and obviously from just a resource standpoint. I think Baton Rouge has done a decent job of providing, making sure that all the kids have Chromebooks, right? But even recently, my daughter, she was assigned a project, and I thought it was interesting, and it actually frustrated me. Had she told me in advance, I probably she probably wouldn't have wanted me to, but I probably would have gone to the school and had a discussion because I didn't believe a project such as that should require any sort of resource outside of what the school has already provided to them, right? And so she needed an outside laptop to do this project. And I said to myself, well, how many other kids, don't have the resource that you have, right? Yes, because the Chromebook that you have, they have all these blocks on it, right? So they can't access the software that they needed to access to do this project. So we had to download, onto our personal computer, the software that she needed to do so that she completed. But I know there had to be other kids that could not have done that, right? Especially if you're working in a virtual environment and yet you're requiring resources that you are not providing to them. And so just thinking, that's a small example of some of the different, ways that I know that other students who do not share the same privilege or do not have access, to parents or don't have the support system that my kids have. I know they're being affected, right? I know they are, and so we have to do a better job. We have to also tell these stories and to our school board officials so that they can be mindful, but also make policies. And as we move forward, think of some sort of framework, like Tramelle talked about, some sort of framework as we move forward, because this won't be the end of this, right? 2021 won't be the end of it. There needs to be a long-term strategy to be able to educate kids. But maybe it's a hybrid situation, right? So that maybe when kids are sick or another pandemic pops up, but certainly in Louisiana, we have a ton of storms and hurricanes. How do we educate these kids in an effective, but also in an equitable manner?
Again, thank you all. We appreciate those answers. And another thing that I wanted to touch up on is the mental health aspect of being just stuck in the house pretty much. A lot of these kids who are possibly in abusive households and just basically being trapped in those environments. I think many children see school as an escape from the sad reality of what may be going on within their households with the people who are supposedly there to protect them. So I just want to touch up on, what do y'all believe? How do you think this has affected children mentally?
Yeah, so I'll jump in, Jazz. Thanks for the question. I think that but even before this pandemic, our students were dealing with a lot of traumatic experiences within their communities, within their homes, within schools. Being a student, a Black student specifically, in a system or institution that has been racist since its beginning, like it's been traumatic for us just to go to school for a very long time. And it's a trauma that we haven't specifically dealt with. And now we see an increase in that because people are literally at home. And so if you're not coming from a safe, loving environment, you are literally trapped. You have no escape, you have no safe space. You as a child don't have the resources to escape that particular situation. So you're literally trapped. And again, I think that even before this pandemic, we were doing a very bad job of dealing with mental health inside of schools, dealing with traumatic experiences. On top of the pandemic, to just be a Black person in society right now has been really rough. And so that's just a trauma that our students bring to school every day. And we just expect them to have this switch that goes on and off. And they can just come in and go back into that same environment and reset every day. And that's hard, especially for a student who's trying to, develop and figure out who they are as people. So we have done a very bad job. And I think that when school is finally back to normal, we have to, again, do something systemically that looks at how we dealing with our students' mental health. Because I know even for an adult, I go to therapy, because it's a real thing. You have to deal with it. And if we continue to not deal with it as a system, from a system level, we'll continue to see some of the same issues that we saw before the pandemic, through the pandemic, and even after the pandemic.
I'll just weigh in. I think in Pennsylvania and some of our schools here, and I know in Reading and here in the Philadelphia area and a lot of our even suburban schools, schools have taken on more global approach to education. We've recognized that all of our students come in the door having multiple issues. You know, we're not just looking at students in a monolithic way. You know, it's not just their academics that we're dealing with. We're also dealing with their mental health issues. We know that it's a whole student that walks through the door. So many of our schools also have social workers. The districts can't afford to have those positions in the schools, and through our school counselors. And so they provide those additional resources to families. We have most of our schools have behavior specialists and they give, different schools give these positions different terms. They label them something different. But all of these people or these adults are providing additional resources to students to deal with these very issues that you're talking about, Jazz. To deal with kids that are coming in with mental illnesses or mental health illnesses. As a special ed director, I can tell you that we had lots of kids with diagnosed mental health issues, and we had to deal with them on a daily basis. And whenever those things occurred, we immediately we could make referrals for their mental health. We can even in this state, you know, require that the parents have to take them to counseling before they can return back to school. You know, especially when you talk about teen suicide. The state has an entire teen suicide prevention program that started, I think it was January 2019. It's a system where the kids can report out anonymously, and they can report out for any friends that they might have. It's a statewide program that they implemented in the state of Pennsylvania. And it's partnered through the Sandy Hook partnership. And because teen suicide is rampant, and you know, kids as young as 10 and 11 are committing suicide. We have 6-year-olds committing suicide. So all of these are things that deal with mental health. And so the state of Pennsylvania has taken this mental health piece very seriously. And so I think we're doing a little bit better on that front. Is it perfect? No. Do we still have issues that of course we can address? But I think we're doing pretty good on that part. It's always more you can do, but schools are putting forth those resources to assist. And this pandemic is not going to be any different. Kids are suffering, they're isolated, they're at home. So I'm sure when kids come back into the schools, I know in my school, they're offering these services to kids even now that are at home, connecting with the families and providing some of these services. So.
I think that is, it's actually encouraging to hear that you guys are doing, you know, taking the steps to do the right things and then kind of having a broad based approach to that. Tramelle will probably know better than I do in terms of the services that we offer here. I can speak just as an in-class mentor. I've served as both a board member for Humanities Amped, which is I'd say that we raise up scholar activists is what I would say. But I've also served as an in-class mentor to a lot of young people in the school system here. And I know that teachers have certainly pulled me aside and talked about this issue. The ones who are over the special education, departments, especially, right? You have these kids who come in with these IEPs, and they're just placed in the classes, but they're not really, at least seemingly, are not really getting the help that they need. Now, I'll also acknowledge that these teachers are overworked in many cases. Even the ones who without the IEPs, they're in classes that don't have teachers sometimes for an entire semester, right? So our school system is stressed, and the teachers are stressed, and so I first want to acknowledge what a incredibly tough position everybody is in. But at the same time, we have to continue to advocate on behalf of young people. I'm not sure what it's going to take. I know that we should normalize this conversation, all right, about mental health and seeing a mental health specialist, anybody that, that's willing to actually talk to young people and just kind of have, their voice be heard. Big Sean recently, I guess I'm showing my age a little bit. The rapper and poet, Big Sean recently in one of his songs talked about, he was taught a lot of different things in school, but he wasn't taught how to deal with anxiety. And so that's something that, I dealt with and still continue to deal with as a grown person. I think that, we have to normalize talking and mental health when we don't have issues. It's not just about, when an issue arises, that's not when you necessarily go talk to somebody and see a professional. It is actually something that should be done on the regular. And so how do we integrate that? How do we, have programs or, people or resources in the school system that will allow students to actually access those resources and be able to, talk about the problems that they are having? Because we do realize in a pandemic, they are probably being especially stressed, not just about, because of what's happening, but also, some of these stresses actually existed long before. I'll never forget a young man who he was having some issues at school, and they actually asked me to go speak with them and get to the bottom of it, right? Mind you, that takes months by itself, right? Because you have to earn the trust of a young person for them to break down. And actually, what it ended up becoming was his parent. His mom didn't even want him to go to school, didn't even care about him being in school, was actually, coming down on him for trying to go to school. He came from a really impoverished situation. He was being bullied at school. And the only way he knew how to express it was to fight. And so he continued to wear this hoodie on his head. And so the teachers would come in and ask him to remove it. The administrators would come in, ask him to remove it. He would get suspended, and he would still, find a way to come back. And somebody would tease him, he would fight, right? And then he'd get removed from school again. And so there was this vicious cycle. And so once finally engaged with and found out what it was really about his hair. It's really what it was about, but all those other things we're able to find out by actually engaging and actually earning the trust of the student. And so that's just a small story. I know that can be, it's probably multiplied and probably worse stories than that exist. And so imagine what that looks like in a pandemic. So.
All right. And thank you for the great responses. Mr. McClaughlin mentioned that with the story that he just told us, I believe that there's an issue with teachers being aware of what's actually happening inside of the classroom, especially in this virtual setting. It's nearly impossible to know what's going on with in the student's mind, what's actually going on in their life. And I think a lot of mindless punishment is going on rather than actually trying to find the root of the issue and why the student is actually doing what they're doing. So do you all believe that implementing more mental health professionals could positively impact the schools in our nation?
I'll just say yes. I think that answer is straightforward and simple, and not to even belabor the point. Yes, more mental health professionals, but also mentors as well. I think there needs to be an overall approach, wraparound services. I used to actually work with a company that provided wraparound services. So you're talking about mental health, you're talking about mentors that would actually do as much as, help students get, IDs, because a lot of times they don't have the parental supervision or they don't have, access to adults who will actually show them just how to navigate, normal, systems. Some are actually in, group homes. And so what help are they actually getting, and so, just providing people who actually do care, from mentorship, but also, like I said, the complete circle of care. CSOC is what we call it here. But yeah, absolutely, yes.
Jazz, I'm going to answer it this way. Schools can employ more mental health workers, but again, they're not going to provide the service in the home. We're still talking about the limitation of access. If the kids are not going to, any mental health worker is still going to have to access the student via Zoom or that kind of platform. So if the student is reluctant to participate, or is reluctant to participate even in a classroom situation, my guess is they're going to be just as reluctant. When you talk about wraparound services, that's not done through the school. That is something that the parent has to initiate. So the parent has to go out and initiate those kind of mental health services through wraparound. That's not something that the school initiates. And that has always been available to a parent to assist their kid in receiving those kind of mental health services. So, I do want to make sure that when we talk about these additional resources, that we're also partnering with parents, that we're not saying to schools that all the responsibility lies in a school. Having been a school board member, and Tramelle can attest to this, sometimes we say that it's all of our responsibilities. I'm going to say put a pin in that. It's not all of our responsibility as a board and as a school district. We are partners with the community. We're partners with the parents. And some of those responsibilities lie there. Now, remember, we're in a pandemic. And right now, the classroom is the home environment. And I'm sympathetic to the fact that parents are not at home sometimes and the parents are not there. But at the same time, I need parents to communicate what those needs are, what's going on in their home. Because without that verbal communication, without that feedback, you're correct. I don't know the struggles that are going on in that home. I don't know some of that information. That information would be important to share because we're not there and we don't know. And there can't be an expectation that we can know all of that information and then know what to provide when there's not that back and forth. I just had parent-teacher conference on Monday and Tuesday. I had 0 parents come. How am I to assist their kids to do better when I had none? There's a disconnect. Now that won't stop me from doing what I can do on my end. But I had no parents from 4 classes for 2 days. So I look at things from a different lens because I've served on one end, I'm serving at another end, and I've been a parent. But as a parent, parents bear a responsibility here too. It's just like Geno said, he's actively engaged there. So I'm sure your parents, Jazz, are actively there. And if they're not, they're asking questions. So I don't say that we put all of this in one bucket and say it's all of the school district's responsibility. The services here in Pennsylvania, I can only speak here, and in my school, the services are there. We are seeking, we are reaching out, we are going there, but at some point there has to be the comeback. People have to say, okay, what can I do? And I believe we do have parents that actively say that and actively ask and are seeking. And can we do more? We can always do more. You never do enough. But I think when it comes to mental health, that becomes really very personal. And you want to encourage your parents to seek that information. And you want to help provide them all the resources that are available in a community. But the bottom line is parents also have to become a partner with you. You cannot force a student. At the age of 14 in the state of Pennsylvania, kids don't have to take medication. Kids don't have to receive any kind of treatment. And the parents can't force them. And that's the unfortunate part about the law, is that that's where it stops. So you do need those parents to support you and to help that, help move that along.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I agree that additional supports and services are always beneficial to schools. So, like, as a general question, mental health counselors would provide we would see better outcomes if you have additional people in schools. But to Ms. Karen's point, like I think that we have to start working as a collective. There's no reason why our school board and our city council is not meeting regularly to figure out how can we utilize the resources that we both collectively have to really change the outcomes for kids through community, through what's happening inside the schools, through what's happening through the out city parish, through what's happening at the state level. So many times, like in governance, you see everyone working in isolation. And I mean, your family talked about this all the time. If we combine our resources, we have more to do more. And so like we have so many resources that flow throughout this city, but people are just on their high horse and want to work in isolation. And we're really doing it to the detriment of our own community. So I think that we do need more support as it relates to mental health within schools, but I do believe that there has to be an intentional, some intentional steps taken to be more collective in the work and in governance. And then we can see literally overnight, if we work as a collective, how we can really help outcomes. So absolutely spot on, Ms. Karen, that we need to be working collective and stay out of our silos to do more for our communities.
I'll give you one example. Some of our wraparound agencies in Pennsylvania work in our schools. So instead, they provide the services in the schools so that the kids don't have to, the parents don't have to worry about it happening in the homes. They're located in the schools. The wraparound services are provided in the schools. There are major agencies that provide those services right in the schools. That's happening all throughout the state. So they have done exactly what you're talking about, Tramelle. But you're correct. The governments have to come together. And that's just not for school services. That's for a lot of different services for your, there's a lot of services you can collaborate on to save money so that you can open up other avenues in your budgets to spend money in different areas as well.
Yeah, and just to add one last thing, we have a lot of behavior services within our school district too. One of the biggest issues for a very long time was there was a disconnect between agencies and the school system. So there was like a limiting of access when literally like it's already paid for. Most of this is funded through like Medicaid programs and stuff like that. So all you literally have to do is provide access. You could literally have a different unit at every single school. And so, but because of adults fighting and political, again, here we go with the political fights, like we were having problems with behavioral services getting access to schools to the point to where they were about to start pulling out of schools. And I'm like, this is literally a free resource and we're infighting because of this. So more states should do what Pennsylvania did and just allow the access. So again, we're working as a collective to make see better outcomes.
So here in Richmond, with all the civil unrest, police in schools were a huge conversation. A lot of people believe that they weren't necessary in schools, especially punishing the children. A lot of people believe that they should be there to protect them. And a lot of people were, instead of having police, they were recommending that we add more mental health professionals instead of them. So if students are having the issue, instead of, having a police presence there will be somebody there to talk to them, calm them down. So people were saying that we need more of that. And it became a huge discussion and debate amongst a lot of people here. So I just want to know, what are y'all's personal opinions on policing in schools?
I'm gonna start this one because this is my pet peeve. I voted no for the police contracts in our schools in Reading for years. And I'll say it because my voting record showed it. Police have one position, and that's the same position that they have had for years on the streets. Schools are not police states. And when you have police in your schools, that's exactly the message that it sends. Police, when the police they're still in the Reading schools. I voted no every time. They got these great contracts, paid them all this money, and they're in those schools. They walk around. You want to know who they ticket? Black and brown kids, the males. You have one fight, you get a summons. Summons costs money. That's a record. Pipeline to prisons is what I called it. I said every Black or brown kid that graduated from Reading High School also graduated with a record. You go to a white high school, you have a fight, you just have a fight. There's nothing on your record. Because guess what? They only have security in their schools. Now, we had security guards, but it didn't mean an automatic police person was writing you a citation. Why did Black kids have to be given tickets for a basic fight? Because the definition of serious bodily injury, there is a United States definition, a definition for serious bodily injury. And in most fights with kids, that is not the case. But in urban schools, Black school kids with Black kids, schools with Black kids, you get a ticket, a summons, a citation that follows you, that stays there. We don't need policing in schools. You get a good security team and teachers who are not afraid of kids, and you get good structure and expectations, and you're good. And this policing idea is because that's what people believe Black people need, to be policed. And then what do kids do in schools? They act out. And then you go on television, or you go outside after school, and you guys fight in the park down the street. Well, can I tell you something? My jurisdiction does not, if you look at Pennsylvania law, my jurisdiction does not extend to the parking lot down the street. That's the job for the police. I'm not walking 2 blocks down the street to break up a fight. As a building principal, I was a middle school principal. No, but I did police down the street because the kids were messing with shop owners half a block down. So you know what I did? I walked down and talked to the shop owners, and I said, my kids have no business in your stores. They need to get on their buses on SEPTA after school, and they need to go home. The shop owners were very pleased that I walked down the street and put some high expectations and said that, no, these kids shouldn't be in there. So then where did I plant myself every day after school? I went down the street. I made sure my kids got on the buses. I eliminated the gathering of those kids down there by the shops, going in and just being a nuisance. They weren't being real troublemakers. They were just being a nuisance. So I did that, and I eliminated that. I made sure I had high expectations. When you walk out my door at the end of the day, you get on a bus, you go home. I would get in my car. I would chase them down the blocks where they weren't expecting me, when they would, go through little alleyways. Where you going? That's not the bus. Then I call your mama. See, that's what we have to do with our kids. You let them know that you mean what you say and say what you mean. I didn't have police. I didn't have security. I just mean what I say. And I'm 5'3". But I would stand up to a kid 250 pounds and 6 feet. And he's looking at me like, what you gonna do? And I'm like, what you gonna do? It's okay. That's just what you do. Our kids know, because they knew I cared about them. And these are our Black and brown boys. But, I don't believe in the police. I don't know what you guys think.
No, I mean, I would just add, spot on. I just never understood why we have, first of all, armed officers fully dressed like they're ready to go out in the streets and protect. It's mind boggling to think that there was ever a necessary need for police. And again, the armed police officers, full combat inside of these schools. It's just, to me, it's crazy. As a teacher, I just never felt unsafe. I literally never felt unsafe. These kids were just gonna do me something, and I worked in middle school, and let me tell you, it's either you love it or you hate it. And so I just never felt unsafe. I never felt like I needed to call a police or to have a police come break up a fight in my classroom. Because I just, Miss Karen said, I set expectations. And I always tell my kids, if you fight in here, you better know what you're doing, because we're gonna all get up and we're gonna continue on with our day. Because like, it's just like, you have to regain the trust of kids, and kids know when you care about them. Like I stood up to some 270-pound football players who probably would just pluck me away. But I mean, they understood and they had value and respect in our relationship. School has to become relational. And if you really want to have a controlled environment inside of school, build relationships with your students. And I promise you, like, I just never felt unsafe with, we had about 642 middle schoolers running rapid. Like, I just never felt like I was unsafe. And so I think that policing in school is a bad idea from the start. There are ways to have controlled environments where you don't need law enforcement in full combat gear, like bringing control. And I think another disconnect is part of the reason that police are utilized in schools is because of fear of having a controlled environment. And so when you have teachers inside of schools who are unfamiliar with communities, don't look like the students that they serve, and trying to deliver quote unquote education, like you already have a problem at its root. Yeah, policing in school is a bad idea. There are other ways that we can build relations and have great school environments.
I was wondering when we were going to touch on stuff like this now. All right. So, look, the police should not at all, in any circumstance, armed police at that, be intervening in school fights. There are going to be fights. There were fights when I was in school. I was a part of many of them when I was in school, and I was never arrested for them, right? And to some extent, there's going to be drugs, right? There's going to be some of that, right? When we understand that, and it's about addressing it's about how do we address it, though, right? And I definitely don't believe that police are the way. Obviously, there's this whole defund the police movement. This is one way that we can defund the police. Why? Because police are getting contracts to go into schools to arrest Black and brown students, give them a record that follows them for the rest of their life. Tell me how that makes sense and look, I'm gonna talk to Black people too, because it's a lot of Black schools and Black administrators that believe that, oh, this is just the way. Let me tell you, when I was in school, I'm not gonna tell you when I graduated, but when I was in school, I remember when they came up with this policy. It was a zero tolerance policy, right? And that was the start of all of this that we see now. Now we have armed guards, right? I told you I do a lot of work in the schools, and of course, that means I don't get along with a lot of the school administrators either. One of my schools, in which I'm not going to call them out by name, but one of my schools, 2 weeks into the school year, was a new administrator last year, and I'm sorry, maybe it was 2 years ago. And he decided, this Black man, right? He decided that he was going to do a shakedown of students, right? A drug shakedown. And he called in, the police. They come through, and the word that I got from a substitute teacher who calls me, because he knows what I do, he calls me and say, look, you need to make some noise about this. They pulled all the kids out of the classroom. They had them lined up on the wall, did a pat down of every single student. And the problem that I had with it is there was no credible information that there was drugs in that school, right? I remember the days when they would send a dog down, and kind of do searches. There was no credible information. There was no report of drugs in the school. It was simply to intimidate those students and to let them know that, hey, we have zero tolerance. That should not be allowed. And that's an issue that, Black folks, we need to address to ourselves. Joe Biden, right? Joe Biden famously had the, 94 crime bill, right? But we forget that, again, it was a lot of Black people who were saying, yes, we need to be hard on, drugs. We need to be hard on crime. We need to do this and that. But you're not thinking about all the different ways that it actually affects the students. If we don't believe that the humanity of a Black student or the body of a Black student is worthy, of the same treatment as a white student, what are we actually telling them when we actually send the police into those schools and actually beat up on them, or what message are we sending? I know I'm rambling, but that is a pet peeve of mine. It's something that I probably need to spend more time on. Unfortunately, we're pulled in a lot of different directions trying to advocate on a lot of different issues. But in terms of education, we need to remove the police from these schools. We need to also empower the administrators, because again, we punish administrators, we punish good teachers for intervening. They get sued, they get fired just for intervening, right? That wasn't the case when I was in school. Look, I saw teachers, pick up these 250, pound guys who are, involved in a fight. They could intervene, they could remove them. No, they have to beat up on them, but they certainly could at least put their hands on them and remove them, right? They no longer can do that. Why? Because they feel like they're gonna get sued, right? And so we need to be able to empower teachers, administrators to at least be able to intervene, break up fights, remove students from harmful situations. Because I'm tired of watching security camera footage of police officers who have body slammed or beat up. We had a situation, I think it was in Bruley, Louisiana, where we had a police officer who literally beat up a kid. Why? Because he was mouthing off back and forth. Does that scare you as a grown man that a 16, 17-year-old is standing up to you, mouthing off on you? Look, that might be disrespectful. It's not the thing that students should be doing. But what we're not going to do is beat up Black kids because we feel disrespected, right? What we have to do is find somebody who can actually communicate with that child and call the parent, get them out of there if we need to. But policing is not the way. We in society, we're never going to police our way out of situations. And so we certainly should not be trying to do that with kids. But I'm glad we finally touching on some real, not to say the other things are real, but touch on, some of the more, I guess, controversial things that are going on in these schools.
All right, thank you for that. And with my final question before I hand it back over to Ms. Vanessa, I wanted to touch up on what Mr. McClellan just mentioned with drug checks and everything. I realized in my middle school, when I was there a few years ago, I saw that Black children were given far more harsh punishments for minor things, especially compared to white children. And even on a group level, like with classes, they would do drug checks with drug pat downs with the non-honors classes, which are predominantly Black, but with the honors classes, I haven't seen them go in the honors class once looking for drugs. And I think that those are absolutely traumatic because I fondly remember one time they were doing a drug check in a class next to mine, and one of the dogs smelled some meat in one of the children's bag, and they pulled her out the class and everything, and she was absolutely petrified. It's just terrible that she had to experience that. It's traumatic and it shouldn't go on. So I just want to know, what are y'all's personal opinions? Do you think that Black kids are targeted more so than white children in schools?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really what I was touching on. And I probably went on a small rant and didn't really articulate, my feelings on it properly. It is the trauma that we leave, our kids with. I got to sit with one of the classes that actually experienced that, situation that I was referencing earlier. And that's where it actually came out. I was actually there to talk about something completely different. We were talking about social justice and kind of, teaching them how to use and advocate on their own behalf from within their schools. And that was the thing that they brought up, right? That was this situation that they brought up and how could they change that? And they talked about how it made them feel. One of the young ladies cried about it. And I thought about, man, if that had been my son's classroom, it would have been a situation, right? We should be educating kids. We should not be leaving them scarred. We should not be leaving them with, negative perceptions of police, right? We should be trying to build young people up. And that is what a classroom is for. It is not to send a message that we're going to be strong on crime. It's not to send a message that we're, going to be tough on you. It's how can we engage? How can we, leave you with life lessons and even teach you about the consequences, because these are young people who are aging. Some of them are actually 18 years old, right? And teaching them about the consequences of maybe of behavior and choices, but certainly not to scar them for life, right? And so I'm sorry that that's happened to you and any of the young people that Jazz. That's something that we certainly need to address. Again, when I'm in some of the white schools, Not that we have many here, because many of our white students actually go to private schools now, but you don't hear about any of that happening. You don't hear about those sort of, shakedowns or crackdowns. And one of the students, and I had to correct him, man. One of the students said to me, in this particular school, he said, yeah, but we McKinley, man. Like we need, almost as if they were deserving of that sort of treatment, right? That is how we have normalized policing in school. That is how we have normalized even just the gates around the schools, the metal detectors. They are in a police state, and that is traumatizing. And they will walk out of those doors believing that they are deserving of that treatment. And so when they have interaction with police outside of those doors, it's already been normalized. So they believe that they should be treated that way. Why? Because we're McKinley. And I'm here to tell you that, nah, Black people, Black student, Black man, Black young woman, you are not deserving of any sort of treatment, that leaves you scarred for life. So unfortunately, I think we have to address it. And I know that's, to, Tramelle and Karen, maybe that's from, I think there's policies that we have to look at, and, make sure that we are actually holding ourselves accountable, because it is the elected officials who actually make these decisions.
Yeah, and I'm so glad, man.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm going to just add to Geno, because I think, one, I think, Geno, you reminded me of something that happened during construction of one of our buildings. We had just renovated a building, and they put up these gates in the building, it was just a courtyard. And I made such a big to-do. It was all over the newspapers, because for me, they were painted silver. And when the gates closed, they made this big noise like prison gates, clank. And it just tore me apart. And I was quoted in the paper as saying they were prison gates. And I wanted them removed. I didn't like them. I thought they should have been a more decorative gate, because it was just a courtyard. And I got all kind of flack from the community. I mean, people outside of the community who weren't even in Reading, the suburbs, because I likened it to being in prison. And I did not like that. And because I said, this is a school and not a prison. And the gates should reflect the beauty of a school and not a prison, because our kids are not prisoners in a building. And it's very much like what you're talking. The school should be a reflection of a school and not the prison. And our kids should not feel like that that's where they are. And that should be just even in the buildings that they're in. And I know that Vanessa has now shown up, so we must be running out of time. So Tramelle, you go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna agree with both of you, Geno and Karen said. Like, it's up to us as the adults to create an environment that's all of the things that we want, nurturing, where kids can learn, where kids feel safe. Like, it's up to us to create that. So like, we have to sit back and like really think about like, how do we even think about safety inside of schools, and like again change the infrastructure and the conditions that this is a normal thing, because it's not normal to have armed police officers walking and through class, like relegating schools. Like, that's just not normal. So we have to create the environment that we want to see for our students, but it has to be a priority. I mean, I know that, for instance, on my board, if something came up to remove police from our schools, it would be just this big ordeal. Like, so people who are elected have to be engaged with the people who they're sitting to these offices to make decisions, because like some of these people, policing in school is a priority, and they'll never take it away from schools. So we just have to be engaged with the people we send to office to represent us and be our voice.
Well, that's all the questions I have. I just like to thank you all for coming and engaging in such an important conversation and talking about these things that are often overlooked in our communities. So thank you all for coming and letting your voices be heard before us all. So I just like to pass to Miss Vanessa.
Thank you. Thank you, Jazz. Thank you all. What a wonderful, deep, informative conversation, triggering, to use the words of one of my moms, conversation that we have had today. We do have a couple of questions that came in from our attendees that I'd love to share with you. We'll make them quick. But I'm going to, and the way I'm going to do that is assign each question to one of our panelists. Okay, so the first one I will share with you, Karen, because I know that both you and Tramelle are familiar with this, and you may have covered this earlier. Our attendee wants to know, how would you go about running for school board? Is it the normal electoral process as any candidate would to get on the ballot?
Well, in Pennsylvania, the school board process is prior to January or around January of that particular year. We are a 9-member board in the state of Pennsylvania. So it's usually 5 1 year and 5 2 years later. I mean, 4 2 years later. And it starts with a petition. You can run both on the Democratic. If you're a Democrat, you can run on the Democratic ticket, and you can also cross file and run on the Republican ticket. It requires, in most cities, in Pennsylvania, we're all third-class cities except for the city of Pennsylvania, except for Philadelphia is a first-class city. In most of the third-class cities, you have to get signatures, 100 signatures for your petitions, and you then file those petitions. And once you get those 100 signatures, that is what puts you on the ballot. And so once your name is put on the ballot, then you're ready for the primary, which is in May. And that's what gets you on the ballot for the May primary, is those 100 signatures. So it does require you to get those 100 signatures. So if you're going to cross file, you'll need 100 Democrats, and you'll also need 100 Republicans. And if you're not a Republican, you have to get a Republican to circulate your Republican petition to get that. So you usually put your campaign committee together. You need a campaign chair, you need a campaign treasurer, and because just like any other political position you might be running for, you have to file all that paperwork. You have to have you have to have the committee, you have to have a chairperson, because you have to do all your financial paperwork. And you have to keep those records, because political campaign it's very important that you have all of that, and that you run and keep up with any finances that come in, because any donations that people make to your campaign have to be reported. They have a timeline, and you have to make all those reports, and you must do all of that in a timely fashion, because you can be penalized. And then when you're penalized, those monies don't come out of your campaign funds. Those monies come out of your own pocket to pay, because they're filing deadlines that you must keep. Then you go on the ballot for the May primary. If you win, then you're of course then in the general election. And then anyone can vote for you if you are on both ballots, on both sides of the Republican and Democrats. I won 4 different elections because I was on for 4 different terms. So that's how my span of 14 years came about. And I ran a grassroots campaign my first year in 1999. I started with $250 that I got from the teachers union in Reading. That was my first endorsement, was through the teachers. And I ran a real grassroots. I hit the streets. And that's what I did. I just hit the streets and got signatures door to door. But I'll also tell you, you need to know your constituents. You need to know who's voting. It's important to know who votes in your area. Now, our elections were all run at large. So that means anyone in the city of Reading could vote. We weren't run in districts or other things like that. In some school districts, they run by districts. And so only a certain portion of your area votes for that particular seat that's open or vacant. But we all ran at large. We were all at large seats. So the entire city voted. But it is important to know who your constituents are. And as an African-American running, I was not from the area. I had lots of negative campaign. They were talking about me like a dog. I mean, it was bad. They called me everything. They called me a transplant. They called me all kinds of names. And I just, but it's kind of weird because the white women voted for me. That was who voted for me year after year after year. And I still was the one that campaigned and was able to speak and speak out for the Black and brown kids. And that's how I was able to maintain for 4 different terms.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Karen. Okay, this next question I will deliver to Tramelle. And I'm not sure, I think you should be able to help with this one. Do kids still have access to mental health resources during the pandemic, through the schools during the pandemic?
So yeah, so the resources that we provide, so we have like eye care advisors, we have, like I mentioned earlier, the behavior services within schools. So yeah, so kids still have access to the majority of the services that they would have had while they were in school. It may look a little different in a virtual platform. Individual principals are doing individual things to kind of deal with this on an individual basis. So yes, but all of the resources that were originally available to kids still are delivered. We still have after school programming that's like delivered in a virtual environment. So yeah, they still have access to all of the resources that were available while school was going on. If for any reasons within my district, if there's not, kids are not receiving resources that they were once receiving while they were in school, like you should reach out to the board, your board member, you should reach out to the school to see like what's the mishap. Because as we shifted throughout the pandemic, things were just all over the place and people were doing, a lot of different things. So yes, but the resources that were available to kids are still available to kids.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then this last question is for Geno. I think this is a perfect one for you. How do we get more parents to speak before the school boards to earn the process and advocate directly to those who are making the decisions?
Obviously the school board meetings are, regularly scheduled, right? So just, I think having an awareness of when they actually occur is important. And I'm not sure if that's something that, the school board could probably do a better job of, but certainly we have just as in terms of, activists and, advocates have made it a point to try to engage people, and let them know it is their civic duty, right? Go engage your school board members. Go engage your council members as well, right? Even though the council doesn't oversee obviously education, but just in terms of everything that we vote on, right? I know I think the subject matter of this was local elections matter. We just had an election. Go there and hold them accountable. What did they promise you when they asked for your vote? Okay, so then go hold them accountable. There are many different things that were, going on here in Baton Rouge that, we had to just as individuals step up and go engage, in many cases fight. Tramelle touched on the fact that, a lot of our districts are gerrymandered in a way that leaves white Republicans over a predominantly, when I say predominantly, like an 80% Black school district. And many of them have never had kids that actually have gone to a public school. They put their kids in private school, but they want to decide, how Black, kids are educated, and it's difficult. And so that goes, from everything from, school facilities, one school on the, what we'll call the whiter side of town will get $60 million in renovations. And then the school in the northern side of town will get $18 million or $12 million. It might get pushed up to 18. And Tramelle will be familiar with what I'm talking about. Eventually it gets to 21 million, but it takes a lot of agitation, a lot of table shaking, a lot of raised voices just to get the attention of the media, and then to get other people attracted to the conversation. Famously, we had the Lehigh name change. Some of you guys are familiar with Gary Chambers, and he went viral here. But what people don't realize is that started when I was a high school junior. I was a high school junior, and I went to that school, and it started with really just a small few of us just not liking the name, the Robert E. Lee High School. We were the Fighting Rebels. We had Confederate flags everywhere. But as students, we didn't like the way that made us feel, because we're being bused to this school. And then fast forward, here it is, however many years later, and my son was due to go to that school. And so we're talking about, that was 2016. My son was due to go to that school, and they just built a new shiny school, $56 million, I believe, they put into that school. but they hadn't changed the name. What they wanted to do was they wanted to take the Robert E off as if we didn't know who Lee was, right? And so again, we were right there in front of them. We lost that fight. We lost that fight. And so 4 years later in 2020, here we are again, and we fought that fight. And luckily we had, some young advocates, Tramelle, Darius, and some others on the board who were, supportive of what we were doing. And we were able to get one more, person to vote, in our favor. But I think that was also the sign of the times. George Floyd had just happened. And so, they felt that, I guess, the time was right. But they still want to control that process, and so there are so many things, even, the superintendent, we at that same meeting, that people saw go viral, they didn't realize that the meeting actually ended with people walking away, and outside we're arguing because, we had a highly educated Black woman who everybody was in favor of. And unfortunately, she didn't get the job in favor of and not to disparage her, but our former superintendent, because she, a white lady, I think out of, I forget where she was from, they gave the position to her. And now here we are, I think 2 months later, and she's no longer on the job. And so we have to now in Baton Rouge start that process all over again. Wasted resources. And so, everybody in the sound of my voice, if you're in Baton Rouge, you need to make sure that you engage now and you show up to school board meetings. Why? Because this is going to happen again. You should also question those individuals who voted for the previous superintendent. Why did you vote that way, right? Why were the other people who were excluded from those conversations? And there were several different names, one of whom now is the interim chair. Why were those people not, selected? And so there are a number of different things, right? ITEP, where do our tax dollars go? We send out millions of dollars to, or give away millions of dollars to corporations that actually are meant to, help us rebuild schools and education. We just give it away here in Baton Rouge. We need parents to step up and come out to that. So I guess what I'm saying is, to answer your question, and not to be so long-winded, is that there are so many decisions that are made. What was it? It's Wednesdays, right? It's every other Wednesday, I believe, Tramelle. There are so many decisions that are made that affect that affect the well-being and the education of your child that you don't even realize, right? And it takes people showing up. If it's charter schools that you don't want, if you don't want to see any more charter schools, of which we now probably have an oversaturation of that in Baton Rouge, right? You need to speak up about it. And also, because charter schools aren't held accountable in the same way, meaning they don't answer to the board in the same way. They have their own kind of process. That's something that we need to be discussing, and it's something that we need to be holding those who continue to vote for those charters, we hold them accountable. And so I'll just leave it there, but we certainly need parents. There are other groups that are actively engaging. The Urban League here in Louisiana is one that actually does have a parent. I forgot what they call it, but it's a program that actually helps parents develop their voice and actually puts them in place to go in front of the school board and advocate on behalf of students. So yeah. I know that was a long-winded answer.
No, that was a great answer, because what I got out of it and what I've gotten out of this entire conversation, and I believe that the attendees will probably feel the same, is that this is a partnership. We all have to work together, parents, school boards, teachers, and the students. And so it's up to all of us to encourage each other to do the best that we can in this scenario, and to make sure that we're exercising our rights in the right way, by focusing on these elections and making sure that we are holding each other accountable in this partnership. And I guess with that, we've definitely run over in time, but this was a fantastic conversation, and we look forward to being able to share this information with many others, and I will make sure that I share it with you as well, so that you can share it with your counterparts. I just want to leave this off by saying thank you to you all for being a part of this conversation, and for joining us, and for supporting Moms of Black Boys United and Mob United for Social Change. And we will continue to look out for you all in the future, especially our moderator, Jazz Miles, who was fantastic today. And I just want to thank you all for being a part of this. And with that, You're welcome. You're welcome. With that, I'm going to wish everyone a great weekend and look forward to hearing from you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Tramelle, you need to contact me. I got information about superintendents.
I will.
Yes.
Okay.